Hello everyone again. So just to start off the video again, this is probably going to be a lot shorter than the other one, but if you haven't seen the one on how to make colors, I would highly recommend that first. But this one is talking about just outlines. And this is one that I don't find as detailed or as needed to be so in-depth. This is why it's going to be a lot shorter. But next time I will cover what's called jaggies, if you don't know. Um, I won't even go into detail right now about any of it, but it's something I believe should really be known because it hurts a lot of pixel art. So, of course, you can see how in this example is just black outlines. You can probably pretty quickly see it's just that simple. If I were to just go ahead and change this to this, you can see pretty quickly how it doesn't really work, and that's just because of how I made it. But if I were to adjust it, you can see it still works. However, it kind of makes everything seem, in my opinion, with the background, or just that it is less prominent in the image. And that's why I find just outlines useful. If you're creating something more realistic in art, sometimes you might not want an outline. In games, I find it especially important to highlight something in red or in white to just show that it's like a certain player, right? So if you have player 1 or player 2, you could use blue or red. For the second example, you can see how it's just a colored one. I've kept this the same because I didn't know what to do with it. But for this, you can see how I simply have the darkest color I could find, and I use the same way I used to pick colors, which I've shown in the last video, and I simply just make it darker, and that's the outline. Same with this one, and with this. For each of these three, for each, the book, the pencil, and both these planets, they're all using the exact same tone of color as well. And it's so dark that it doesn't really need to be changed all too much. It can be pretty similar, and it'll still not really notice too much. And for the blue, of course, I did change that though. And you can see how that it really makes it pop out a little bit, but in my opinion, if you want something to stand out completely from everything else, your best bet is just a black or white outline. I can show you also this would be completely white outline. Exactly, doesn't exactly work in this, but let's say you highlight something in a game, you might want it to highlight white, and that would be a really good example of how you could make it look a lot better with just that. In this example, I've chosen both. Um, the way I did this is I call it inner outer outlines, where the inside of stuff, or at least for the most part, um, is colored outlines. So I've just made a darker version just like the colored outline. I've used that same color, and I've just used it for the inner parts of this. Um, it works quite well. This example is pretty terrible, and I will show you quickly this example instead of how I've used black outlines for any outside outline, and on this one, I use black outlines as well, but also a multicolored one. So I've done for most of the interior outlines, like this one mainly, and a lot of this as well, is instead of just being all black, it's also colored. And then lastly, this is kind of a hard one to show since I don't really have any lighting or shadows in my scene. But you can see how I've just made the point base, let's say, whoops, here. So if this is where the light is coming from, then this is exactly where it's going to be on the outline. So you can see how it's just outlined in a nice, like, little lighter color. So it's pretty much in between here and here, but it's closer to the darker color because you still don't want it to be like a part of the image. You just want it to be like the outside of it to highlight it, pretty much. Um, and you can simply just see this is pretty much the main four ways. There are a few other ways that I will show pretty quickly as well, but generally, this is pretty much the four different types that you can choose from. And outlines can make significant difference, which is good, but only if you use them well. So you can see here how I just also have these exact same ones, except I don't have the um, I kind of have a mix of them instead in each one. So I've got just the black outline one here. You can see how it's just completely black on all outlines. And then for the second one, I just have it so that, oops, both the top, where there might be more of a lighter part, has just a lighter version of pretty much black, right? So I have black on the bottom to show that this is probably the darkest side, or where the shadows casted, right? And then I have the brighter version of the outline on the top left. Along with on the inner parts, I have also colored outline. And then on the third one, I just simply have a also dark version on here, so it's just completely colored outline. There's no extra shadow or lighting on the outside. So one last thing I want to cover about outlines though is, let's say you're making a sword. I don't have a sword right now because I didn't have one in my files and I was too lazy to make one at the moment. So, for example, let's say I have my book. Now, if I put no outline like this on each one, you can see how it's okay now, and if I do it here too, you can see it's okay, but it kind of feels like it's missing something, right? Like the outside of the book doesn't feel as sharp or as hard as it should. This part is pretty okay. I kind of like it how it is right here, but removing this part of the book doesn't really make it seem like the back of the book, like the casing of it, isn't solid, right? And same with this pencil. It's hard to tell if this part is soft or hard, and if this point is like pointed or not. So if I do this, then you can tell that this is at a diagonal now, and this is pointed. With a sword, let's say you have something like this. Oh wait, no, like this, sorry. So if you have something like this, and you have a blade, let's say, that goes down here, if you remove this pixel, then it'll become that the point is here instead of right here. The diagonal sort of seems to end, right? So if you keep the diagonal going to here, it ends at here. But if you end it here, it just ends it here, of course, right? But if you want it to be better, you usually just add this pixel back because it makes it seem a lot better. Now, the real reason to add this is mostly just because this is not exactly fashionable. The extra end on this part isn't exactly needed, nor is it, like, look good, and it just kind of adds an extra dead space pixel, and if you just remove that, it seems always a lot better. So, if you go ahead and add that same thing back to this, will it look good? Well, probably not, but the main reason why is because you have no identifier of seeing that it is a diagonal. If you look at this, if it ends at a diagonal and it's already ended here, you can tell that this is where it's supposed to end, right? So you can see that this makes sense on why it's not going to here, because it's not kind of got a point there, it's got a point right here. And it's kind of already got the edge right here. If I put it something like this, now it seems kind of more pointed to the end, right? So in a sense, this kind of floor is doing it for us, but you really want to take a look at edges on swords. If you go onto Pinterest or any other like pixel art thing, like Twitter, I guess, you can see how they'll probably have on swords some sort of edge like this, and that'll just make it seem like that's more pointed or it's more rigid and like solid. It's not flimsy like a book cover or like a book page right here. Um, and so that's usually why they incorporate this, because if you have something more like this, it usually just makes it seem just like it's rounded, right? It's got more of a soft feel to it, because you know this is how circles behave, right? This is not how um, straight edges behave compared to circles. So that's pretty much why on any hard edge, you just want to have the corner still there. This is even not with doubles. So in doubles outlines, it would be that every outline or every edge you would just have a solid pixel. So every single one would be like this. And it's kind of going to be torture to go through all this, so I won't now. But you can see how it mostly just gives it more of an outline. It kind of makes it stand out even more, so it highlights it to that point as much as possible. If I were to go ahead and remove this background here, and then press Shift O, oh wait, no, I'll remove all this, Shift O, grab just a black, there we go. You can see exactly how it does that, right? It just completely expands it by a little bit more, right? So if I do this, you can see how now that's more of a doubles, where it's just on the outside of it. And it's really up to you whether you do or do not do this. It's mostly just up to preference on how you like the outlines. Um, in my case, I usually like something like this. I find this pretty nice. Because in a case like this, where there's absolutely no outlines, um, it just seems kind of empty, right? Um, but it can look good in a lot of things. Generally, games, though, do have a lot of outlines. So I'm kind of rambling now. Probably a lot of you are left. It's a little bit shorter than last time, and I just wanted to make that clear. Um, so I hope you learned something again. I'll probably make another video sometime soon like this, and I'll see you later. See ya.